Hi, I'm Pete Bakins, CEO of Gamification Plus, and I'm delighted to have with us here today Christian Gossan. He is a business advisor, a digital experience creator and activator. He runs Sharpen Advisory in Melbourne, Australia, and previously spent over a decade leading digital experiences and interactive learning at KPMG globally. I've invited Christian here today after reading his article in the Harvard Business Review, Does Gamified Training Get Results? Christian, welcome.
Thanks, Pete. Great to be here.
I'm going to dive straight in. In the article, it basically starts by you mentioning skimming through a 50-slide deck and then hoping to guess enough answers to pass the test and get back to the real work. I was interested, was this a personal experience you had?
I think my experiences with a lot of learning in corporate environments are around those static volumes of text that we all sort of have grown to hate over time. So that's sort of the genesis of this, was more about a really big, thick sales encyclopedia of all the things that the firm did to help clients with. So for me, that was the start of it, was that similarly boring, uninteractive content.
I have to admit, I once saw a compliance deck. It was 250 slides, and on the last slide, it just said, click here to say you've read it.
Yeah, that's right. So, in a similar vein, we had a really big, I guess, a sales book, or just like a sales encyclopedia, and people were asked to go away and read this. And after they read the big book, they would know about all the things that the firm did to help clients with. And for me, I just didn't think that was a good enough way to share that really important information.
I mean, I think that's very diplomatically put. So what would you say is like the real problem with it? Okay.
I think if you take a firm, so where we were doing this was at KPMG, and so in Australia, there's a firm of 10,000 people, probably 8,000 of them running around every day talking to clients. And it's really important for sales organizations for their people to be listening to client problems, so they can try and then connect those problems with their own solutions. And so the problem is with a big organization, like any big organization, you've got lots and lots of things that you do. So KPMG had about 200 different things that it helped clients with. And so it's very difficult for anybody to just know what all those things are unless you've got some material, or you've got a learning experience where you can absorb that information, then go and be able to help clients with their challenges or opportunities. So the problem that I saw was you've got all these people out there at the coalface helping clients, but there's so much more that people could be helping clients with their problems, but they just don't know enough about what we knew to then connect in the right experts at the right time. So to me, that was just a solvable problem that hadn't yet been solved. And so it sort of just was gnawing away at me.
Okay, so it was bugging you. So how big a problem do you think this is? Like this, shall we say, old-fashioned approach of getting information across?
I think it's a big problem. I mean, if you think about any organization that is helping clients or customers with scale, they've got lots and lots of different either products or services, and it's very, very difficult to create experiences that engage people and help them do their jobs better. There have been lots of examples of this trying to be done in ways that aren't very effective. A lot of money's being thrown at different solutions, a lot of tech's being thrown at different solutions, but we found success with really understanding the motivations of why people would want to learn these type of things, and then market the specific digital experience that we had made differently to different people into the firm as to why they should use it.
That's interesting. I might have to come back to that. But so you were saying there were different journeys for people, like different ways of marketing it to different people coming into the same journey. Is it the same learning environment?
So if you have, if you have a graduate coming into an environment who doesn't know anything, and they really only know the one product in the one division that they're in. When people ask them about what their organization does, the first thing that they're going to want to do is not look stupid, right? So they learn from a position of fear, like I've got to know what we do because I'm going to look stupid if I don't answer that question correctly. So we found that most of our junior users or lower staff grade levels were learning from largely a position of fear, whereas we found that the senior people at the organization were at that level where they had to know what the whole organization did to help clients in order to progress in their roles. So once they got to a certain level of senior management, they then had sales targets on how well are you selling the rest of the organization into clients. And at that point, their motivations were very different to the younger users who were playing out of a sort of more of a fear-based reasoning. They were from a pure career progression perspective. And we've had some extremely senior global people in the top 20 leaderboard who use the platform, and we asked them, why are you still playing? And they said, oh, it's how I keep my claws sharp. Because getting across everything's really difficult. So, just by jumping in and playing this game, every now and then, I'm just keeping myself abreast of what all those products and services are, so that when I have a really difficult, complex problem, I can be thinking about the maybe 10 or 15 ingredients from our organization that'll go together to solve the problem. And so for this person, it was, at a really interesting cerebral level for him, that he's just like, I've got to have everything in my brain at my fingertips ready to go so that I can solve these complex problems.
I like that. Yeah, I've been that person at times. Look, so you call it a game. In the article, it's talking about it as gamification. Why did you see gamification as the answer to this engagement problem?
I sort of stumbled into it, Pete. So I know that gamification is a field, but I didn't realize it was a field until I was sort of halfway along making a gamified learning experience. So I just sort of fell into the fact that this existed, which is probably different to a lot of people who maybe see examples of this working or see examples of it and think, oh, maybe that's something I could apply to my world and to my problem. So I initially was in the States, and I was jet lagged, and I was in a university lecture, listening to the lecturer talk about how you should be solving big problems and taking those big problems back to your organization. It was a business school thing. And the night before, I'd watched an article, something on the TV around using Xbox controllers to fly drones. And for me, it was really weird that you were using play instruments for war and death. And to me, that was just really like, oh, how could they do that? That's weird. And then as I was thinking about big problems at my organization, I was thinking, oh, maybe you could apply some of these game-based principles to something not as serious as death and war, but even just something that's sort of serious like my workplace. And then started to think about how you could use play elements to solve our problem, and went away and came up with a bit of an idea, and then pitched that to our local chairman. And we pitched a terrible idea, Peter. It's really embarrassing when I bring the
Feel
deck
free
out.
to tell us about the terrible idea, because that leads into my next question anyway.
Yeah, so good to have kept the PowerPoints of how bad it was. And so we were thinking, oh, you know, it should be this like shooting game where you use your mouse and you could sort of, or you use something and you could shoot the answers. And maybe if it's shooting, then it should be like a Wild West themed thing. And, you know, so it was a very sort of male centric, you know, silly, cartoony type thing. And it was just going to be around what are the answers, and then, you know, can you shoot it properly? And so, and it looked like it is interesting though, you know, when you put up, I'm a big believer in putting those things up forward to be shot down, you know, to be assessed and laughed at, because the sponsor, obviously a very wise person, Pete, said, I like where you're going. It's terrible, but there's something here that I think is worth us investigating further, and you going and getting some sort of proper help with this, because the problem has been tried to be solved in many different ways previously, and we've never scaled solving the problem. This is potentially a way to solve our problem in a scalable way. So in the absence of any other ideas about this, let's go forward with what you've got. And so we then went to a local indie developer who said, for the measly sum of 15 or 20,000 Australian dollars, which is probably 10 or 15,000 US dollars, or even less in pounds where you are.
Yep.
When we went to, we only got this much money. Can someone make a gamified learning experience for us? We found a developer that was, you know, wrote it in Flash, and you know, our pilot only. Yeah. It was this was 10 years ago. So they did a really cheap but really cool looking piece of work for us, and that pilot was enough. It worked well enough, and then after the 3 months, we then shut the gamified experience down and went to global to go get funding to do something on a sort of more serious scale.
Okay, interesting. So just as a side question, I guess, to come up with your idea, the first one or whatever, are you a player of games anyway? You know, is that where are you playing shoot 'em ups?
No, I stopped playing video games at university. They were too addictive, so I stopped. And so I haven't really played games apart from occasionally, but no, I would say not really. But since working in the gamification field, I've obviously had to do a lot of research into video games, Pete, and unfortunately,
homework now, you see.
Unfortunately, had to buy an Xbox and a Switch and a few other things like that, and really enjoying getting back into some of the old titles, especially the old Nintendo titles. They're like fine wine, some of those oldies. So yeah, I'd say not a gamer, but do like was reintroduced to it, I think, through this project or through this process.
By the way, I've got to say, I have seen a quiz game built in an e-learning platform where they shoot the answers. It's more of a Space Invader style.
Yeah,
sure, it's simple, yeah. And you know, it's fun for a few minutes, but not long enough to get through all the content.
Yeah, and that's I think a big challenge for the people who are trying to make serious attempts to solve problems. Sometimes they can be equated or equal, you know, associated with some of those really poor attempts.
Yeah. All right. So back onto the main topic. You did the test run for 3 months. I mean, obviously, it sounds like it went well but what were the results?
Yeah, so it went really, like, we spent a ridiculous amount of time doing that and getting the so first off, Pete, we had to do this after hours, so this wasn't part of my job. I was a cost reduction and financial management consultant with a day job, revenue targets, usage targets, all those, it was very clearly explained to me by our sponsors that none of those targets would change at all, and this was an after hours project. And so myself and another guy called Alan Clinch were told the same thing. So after hours, we would meet in bars and pubs and sort of move the ball forward every night. So that was about a 6-month project that we did. And it ended with a tournament with all the states of Australia were competing against each other in a live, real-time, sort of quiz session. And it took, well, we had state playoffs and then we had the national, and we didn't realize how much for time investment we would be making into that. But it all went really well. We had a large number of users. We were able to show an improvement in awareness of the services guide. And we had then stories from people about how using this gamified learning experience had actually changed their client conversations.
Okay.
So when we start to get the feedback and the stories from people to say, oh yeah, a client was talking about this, and I remembered from playing that we did that, and then I was able to then make an introduction in. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't have played, hadn't played. So once we started to get those type of stories in, we then pitched to our global head of sales. So she's in charge of, at that time, 150,000 people and 150 countries, and the sort of, 20 billion plus revenue of the firm. So we said, hey, we've done something here in Australia, which is one of the maybe biggest top 10 or 20 firms, but not nearly as big as the US or Germany or the UK. And so we said, hey, we think this is really cool. What do you think? And she said, I think it's really cool. I think no one else is coming up, same as what the initial chairman, no one else has come up with anything that works. And I'm in charge of 150 countries. And so digital solutions for us are the only way that we're going to be able to scale this out to that many people. So, would you like to quit your day job and come work for me, and I'll give you some money to go and build what you sort of, initially had envisaged. And Pete, she didn't realize that what I had initially envisaged was terrible. But, that's with the help, though, of good partners and good people around you, you can then arrive at something better. So I jumped at that opportunity to stop my, my work with clients to try and do something to help the 150,000 people at KPMG, something that will sort of have a really big impact for our people and to help them to be better at their jobs. So, so that was sort of a really big turning point, Pete, to go from an idea through a successful pilot, then into an opportunity to work, to actually have this as my job, creating a solution to that business problem that we had, and to try and have something with a global impact. So there's no way I could have said no to that offer to come and try that.
I think that's a great journey into gamification. So at this point, you've got a chance to impact 150,000 people. Who's actually it going to be aimed at? Is it all of them?
Client-facing staff, yeah, pretty much everyone. And interestingly, we aimed it at client-facing staff, but we, again, when you dive in and do things, it's good because you learn a lot. You make a lot of mistakes. We made the mistake of thinking this would only benefit client-facing staff, because we had a receptionist in Canada, somewhere in Canada, I forget which office it was, but she said, oh, people come in off the street and say they just want to talk to somebody. People call up and say, I need to speak to somebody about tax. And she would say, well, what size business are you? What this? Because she knew the difference between sort of small businesses and corporate tax and indirect. So she knew about all these different parts of the tax world. She knew about advisory, she knew about assurance, and she knew all about the firm. And she said, oh, I'm so much better at my job at reception because I'm able to just get everybody to the right thing. I'm able to call people up for the right decisions, connect them on the phone. I'm able to do all these things that I wasn't able to before I played. And we just went, we hadn't anticipated those benefits. But initially it was aimed and still is aimed at client-facing staff who are at a client side with their ears open. We're just trying to give them more information about what they need to know in their brain so that they can make better connections.
So this is the classic consulting piece. I'm there at the client, and the more I know about the other things we do as a business, the more chance I can find more work for the business. Is that it? Yeah. So your underlying objective of the training is increasing sales, did you say?
Yep. So a couple of things there. It always comes down to the confidence. I think there's a real difference in learning things and then having the confidence to use those things as well. And so we were able to demonstrate that we had a 21% improvement in awareness of the services guide, Pete. But the more interesting metric for us was that 70% of the staff said they felt more confident speaking with clients about how we could help them. And so once you've now got staff that are confident enough to say, hey, we've got somebody that can help you with that. To us, that's a really big deal that our people are out there walking around confident to speak up. And that changes across cultures as well. So in America, I've been told that I'm a crazy person. Like, of course, people are confident to speak with clients about that. And I said, yeah, but in America, you are. But in other parts of the world, people, everywhere else, right? Everywhere else, people are more reserved and less likely to speak up unless they're really sure that they can actually be helpful. And so not only were people better informed, they were then confident enough to speak with a client about, an introduction to somebody. And even in the experience, it says you don't need to sell any of this to a client. You just need to let them know that we do it and that there's an expert somewhere that we can connect you in with. And some of those stories ended up being cross-country referrals. So you'd have someone in a really small country say, a client with a problem, really small country, say, I know we can help you with that. I'm going to find someone in the office. There's no one in the office. So they'll go to a different country and find the person. And the client doesn't care. And so now you've got sort of cross-country referrals happening. And so when those sort of stories come in, it's quite special in the project office, room, because things are happening beyond what you had envisaged initially.
I mean, these are fantastic reports of the success, anecdotal reports from it. It had what was the experience like? Can you talk us through what a player of, and was it called KPMG Globerunner? Is that right?
Yeah, so KPMG Globerunner, we ended up going with the first. So the pre-pilot terrible idea was the sort of cowboy shoot 'em up.
Yeah.
The pilot was like a Wii Games ripoff where if you answered a question correctly, your athlete would run quicker than the other athletes. And it was actually it was visually really nice. We still have people talk about that 10 years later about that experience, which is quite shocking. But that advanced into KPMG.
Wait, I've got to say, is that quite shocking because they've not really had any more fun experiences?
Yeah, their lives are so shallow, Pete.
I didn't mean that. I meant like in the corporate learning and.
I know. But we made that and we put it in the bin. So only a certain amount of people use it for a short amount of time, but we still get people talk about that was called the games, and still people talk about it. But then we made the global version, which was KPMG Globerunner, and that was a travel themed game where as you traveled the world, you learned more about the firm, and then you had to answer questions in sort of mini game quizzes to get enough points to then open up the next location and go around that way. So as a single player, you would play this during induction training. You've got to get to this location of the map before you can stop playing, sort of like a thing. Sometimes that would be used as a competition in the room. Sometimes it would just be a single player. Hey, you need to get to this location, take a screenshot and send it here before you can, finish your induction. And so that was how I used it during induction. And then, but we had over a quarter of the users were coming back and playing just voluntarily. So we would have year on year, a quarter of the players are from another year.
Right.
So they first played in another year. So people keep coming back to this thing year on year and playing. And annually there is a tournament called, what's it called now? I think it's just, I've forgotten the name. It was called the Kleinfeld Cup, but they didn't like that because one of the founders' names and stuff like that. So I think it was just called the Globerunner Cup after that. And so each country are invited to play and then have a tournament. And then the top 10 players would then go to a World Cup final. And so you'd have 50 countries usually, between 40 and 50 countries, play off with their top 10 people to see which team gets the best score, and they win basically nothing but a prize to say they were the Globerunners of the year and things like that. So that's how people would use this as in a single player mode to play, or as a team in an annual KPMG global competition.
So there were two different ways to do it, as a team or as an individual.
Yep.
That's interesting. Okay. And could people choose not to take part? Because we often talk in games and gamification that it's only fun if you volunteer to play.
Yes,
but
mandatory.
Then you've talked about mandatory induction, is it?
Yeah, yep. I'm just failing with my light here. Let me put some lights on before we go pitch black here. Hold on a second. It's a really interesting question. In the onboarding, which was a 10-minute experience, people had to do that in most countries.
Yeah.
But then coming back afterwards to play is completely voluntary, and that's where we saw massive usage. I mean, in the annual tournament that I just told you about, the last one, Vaughan O'Leary still runs the program. I've left KPMG, and Vaughan told me the last tournament had 20,000 people play. So you've got 20,000 people from over 50 countries logging in to voluntarily show that they know more about a services guide than the person next to them. And so mandatory fun is a really dangerous thing. We're glad that we're able to get a lot of people voluntarily back to play and compete in tournaments, things like that.
That's good. So their first notion of it was mandatory,
Yep.
but after that, you can come back because we think it's fun.
Yeah, you can come back if you want to keep playing. So often they would get to a location in the map, but the rest of the map's locked. And so people just naturally wanted to, with some of the different hooks we had in there, either go back and perfect the locations they'd been through, or just continue to unlock the rest of the experience.
So I mean, what made that fun? What was so good about exploring, unlocking new places, or what were they having to complete in each place?
I think you'd learn a little bit about each location in each of the different cities that people were visiting. I don't know. There's a bit of secret sauce in there about how things all come together. It's like trying to explain to you how to drive a car now. It doesn't do it justice of going through an experience that's been, bespoke, designed for that professional services individual. And that's sort of what we did. We created, being working in that environment. We thought we knew what people would like to participate in and what they wouldn't like to. And speed was a big thing. So this was, you're going to get to the questions of this pretty quickly, and you're going to get in there and start learning quickly, and you're going to get instant feedback about it, and you're going to be told about how you're progressing pretty. So I don't know why people had fun. I think people did say they had fun, and 80% of people who played the game played the experience said they had fun. But I think most people, a lot of people in professional services are real perfectionists as well, and have always gotten good grades and stuff like that, Pete, as well. So they're like, I'm doing this thing and doing really poorly, because it wasn't as easy. It wasn't super easy. That people just want to get better. And when we were pitching this to different countries, we could pretty much guarantee a country would buy it if the person we were pitching it to got something wrong during the trials. So when we put the experience up on screen shares, this was before COVID, so we were doing video conferencing and stuff on Skype when it wasn't working so well. And if they got a question wrong, though, during the demo, they'd be like, this is outrageous. I should be getting everything right. And it's just a bit of a window into the type of people that were using this experience, that by getting things wrong, it actually got them more engaged. It wasn't just a typical e-learning experience where you don't need to do the course and you can still get 10 out of 10 on the test. So
I think that makes a lot of sense. Your target audience are high achievers to a certain extent. So it's got to be difficult in order to be challenging, in order to be engaging. Is that right?
Yeah. And so for the past 10 years, there was Globerunner. I've made a bunch of different platforms at the firm as well. And if somebody got less than 8 out of 10, there's like a near 100% chance they'll redo like straight away. That's unacceptable. If they get 8, they're sort of, I'm sort of good. But it's the type of community of people where if they get 7, instant redo. It's not, this is too hard. It's instant redo. So I think people liked it being a bit difficult. They liked it was very high definition graphics. It was something a lot nicer as a digital experience that they were used to seeing in that corporate environment. How
important was that, do you think?
I think it's really important, really, really important. And in subsequent tests that I've done or experiments I've done on taking exact same content and just putting it into a really schmick form, like exact same, and just said, all we've done is made it nicer looking. Is that important to you? And that 100% said, yes, it is. Like because people have a commercial level baseline of how nice things should look. And, you're when you're coming into work on the train or people don't go into work anymore, but if you're just playing on an app before you log into work, it's beautiful. And so you can't then go into work and put people through experiences that are ugly or, feel like a database or a system. So when people are used to seeing that sort of thing at work, if you can give them something just a little bit above that, doesn't need to be up here, but just above what's currently offered, people will really, really appreciate that.
I think you've gotten onto one of the really big challenges in gamification, which is people expect that level of aesthetic goodness, but of course it's quite expensive to create. So what sort of budget did you, if you can say, what sort of budget did you need to throw at things to get that experience? Like you say, just slightly better than what the other things that take their attention, shall we say?
Yeah, I won't go into budgets for KPMG Globerunner, but it was largely static. It was a static experience where when people clicked, things sort of happened. It's not like we were making a PlayStation game or anything like that. So the focus was on keeping things really beautiful looking in high definition from a graphics point of view. Really nice sound, really nice graphics, but the rest of it there wasn't an enormous amount of animation, hardly no asynchronous.
Right.
Sorry, no synchronous.
No synchronous.
No synchronous. It was all asynchronous whenever there were tournaments. It felt like it was synchronous, but it was asynchronous. So we learned a lot from our pilot to really dumb things down from trying to do like a multiplayer world type thing, even if it's just a quiz, like that creates a lot of complexity. So we kept, for the amount of users we've had over 100,000 people play. The numbers just keep going up year after year. I think if we looked at the cost per user on that, and then you look at the cost per generated, it's negligible. And so, but costs are one of the biggest issues that anyone has in building an experience. And my experience has shown that if you just have some really nice initial home screens, spend the money up front in the experience rather than at the back, you can then have a bigger impact on, where the majority of usage is. So sort of that can be something that might help some of your listeners.
I think that's a great insight. Yeah. In fact, I think that leads me neatly into my next sort of set of questions, which is like one of the things I also liked about this is that you wanted it rigorously tested. So what I was reading about in the Harvard Business Review was as a result of research and papers. So who ran the study with you and how was it tested?
So how do I say this? Like many gamification practitioners, I've been ridiculed for trying to create experiences that aren't traditional in corporate workplaces. And so if you're in a learning team and you say, hey, I want to do another e-learning on this, and we're going to snazz things up by putting a video in, nobody's going to laugh you out of the room. But if you say, hey, I want to create a gamified learning experience to help our sales teams be better at something, and I'm going to create a cowboy game, a shooting game, people obviously laugh at you. But even when we'd cleaned that experience up to be much sharper and, travel based, and the gender mix was, we had female designers on the team. We had, Pete, I'm pretty sure Marigo Raftopoulos, Marigo?
Of course.
Marigo's from Melbourne, so where I'm from. So we got Marigo in early to help us, just with lots of design things. She's just such a guru that she bopped us over the head about things that we didn't know we were doing, and so we were able to. Sorry, what was the question again, Pete? I've lost my track now. Thinking about Marigo.
You talked about the quality of it, but I was like, who ran the study with you? Yeah, what did you, how was it tested?
Yeah, so I got distracted thinking about how amazing Marigo is, so I'll tell her after this. But we were always getting laughed at or ridiculed or not taken as seriously enough because we were adding in these elements that looked like they were too much fun to be serious. And so we teamed up with, I'd done some study at the Harvard Business School and went back to them, and probably first 5 doors we knocked on were knocked back, knocked back. And then the 6th door, we knocked on the right door. And so we'd been knocking on the wrong doors. We knocked on the right door, Pete, and found 2 professors that were really interested in what we were doing. And the deal was that this would remain completely independent. So I would basically hand them all the data over in a cleaned form, so there was no privacy issues. So completely cleansed and de-identified. They would run the experiments, but I would essentially help them to be running the experiments on the ground and coordinating with the local KPMG offices in different countries that were completing the experiment. But they independently designed the experiment, ran the experiment, and then had the results and published it without me having any input into that process, Pete. So completely independent. I'm not named in the research. I had nothing to do with the analysis or the research. But my initial findings about all the things that I were learning was why they were interested in it. They said, I think you're right. I think you are actually helping your company make money. Let's us prove that for you. So that's that's what they sort of went in and then independently did. So, which is good. The risk was, Pete. The risk was, that they proved that it didn't work.
Well, of course, there's always that risk.
Yeah, but it's real. And so when I ran into people who were like, "Oh, this is rubbish," I said, "Well, no, I think it isn't rubbish. This is why." And Harvard are going to tell us whether it's rubbish or not. And if they say that it isn't, and you've wasted 2 years, then I'll come back and see you then. But
so you waited for the results like this.
Oh, a lot of sleepless nights. No, I knew that it was working because I had so many stories coming back, not from people saying they'd learned, but people sharing back experiences with clients about how they'd be able to better connect them. And so for me, it's not about how much they learn, but about how they then go and use that knowledge. So we can give them the knowledge, but then where they need to be confident enough to then go and use that knowledge in the real world to have results. And we had so many stories from that, and again, Marigo helped us with the thinking around that, to know that what we were doing was real, and that the Harvard research was really just going to just solidify or put in concrete or put in pen the pencil that the claims we've made.
Now, what's interesting to me there is that these results that you're looking for, they're not going to be instant, are they? Because like what we're doing is we're doing a quiz, we're learning some knowledge, but how long might it be until I have a chance to actually use that knowledge? So how long did you have to wait until you saw results and start getting this feedback?
You're right. So it's not like you learn something and then the next day you use it. And so we had people 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, over a year later come back and share stories about what had happened. And I mean, you know what it's like as well, trying to get people to answer surveys or trying to get people to respond to any type of email is really difficult. And, early on, there was one guy that I emailed and said, "Oh, you're a super user, you're a power user. Surely you must have had like some in the real world. Has this helped you at all?" No response. No, no response. Fourth email. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I actually just want some work out of it." I'm like, so trying to get responses back from people about these proof points can be really, really difficult. But we just sort of persevered.
I was going to say, what was the secret? Just persevering?
Yeah, just perseverance. A lot of hard work. That this, is a 10-year-old platform now, and there's just been a lot of investment put into the activation of it. And I think, Pete, for your gamification listeners and community, I think the story of ours is not just about seeing the problem, creating a solution. It's the execution and activation of that solution then across 100 countries that is the toughest part of it. The design's the sort of almost fun part, if you can call it fun, but it's the most fun part.
Yeah.
And then, getting out, selling it to all the different organizations, and selling can take many forms. It just be convincing if it's an internal platform, convincing people to use it, dealing with turnover, dealing with leadership changes, doing that in 100 countries becomes a real a marathon, a multi-year marathon spanning many countries. So for me, that's one of the most important things of people creating gamified solutions is around activation and execution, and making sure that you're ready for the bumpy road of the build and then the execution, rather than just the dizzying heights of the first few weeks of the romance with designing a new.
Yeah. I know that. It takes time, and you have to put effort in to roll it out, particularly. Oh God, I've got so many more questions, but I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to keep it to just a couple more. One was that You mentioned it earlier as well, actually, that leaders in each office played the game. And I was wondering how you got people to play, the leaders to play, and why did you push for that? What actually happened?
So when we're rolling these type of things out in different countries, we typically go to the leader of sales in a country and say, currently the only way you're doing this is by sending these books out. We've got a global solution here that's risk cleared and ready to go and is available to everybody in your firm. But we just need to give them a reason to actually click. There needs to be a reason to click, otherwise no one will ever click on it. So we'd like you to launch this. We'd like you to help us to get this, work with HR to get this into the onboarding of everybody that's new. For your existing staff, we'd like to launch a tournament for the country. We'd like to do all these things, but we need you to be able to play first, so that you'll be a credible launcher of this platform. And some leaders took that on. Some people were like, no, this isn't for me. And that's, it's my job to convince them that it should be. And that becomes a difficult conversation with some people. And more of a difficult sell. And others were, so happy that they had something that was fun that they could go and get their staff involved with that would help the organization make money. So we had different responses from different leaders about activation in their countries and with the different people.
Were you able to see differences between how countries adopted and used the solution based on whether the leaders played or not?
We did actually. We saw, so the Harvard research as well as we also saw, so that was from a performance perspective. So when Harvard looked at this, they saw that when leaders were really strong in rolling this out, that then they'd have a higher uptake, higher usage, and a stronger correlation with increased revenue. What we saw was an increased comfort level in using the experience. And so if you think back 10 years ago, rolling out a beautiful looking high definition digital experience in that conservative environment where people have just flicked from a SAP screen into this, which is, blue, and it's just a beautiful experience. People were worried that that their bosses would think that they were not being productive.
Yeah.
And so where we had leaders who would say, hey, I'm playing Globerunner, I've got this score, you should get on and play it, then the relaxation levels were really high. Where you didn't have those leadership announcements, people were more hesitant in playing. So leaders have a huge influence on their people, much more than they probably think. And I'd encourage anybody listening to this, if you are in a leadership position with people underneath you, to encourage any type of innovation around learning or performance, to just get people doing the right thing.
I mean, I agree completely, but it's great to hear it at scale as well, that this is what it takes. I have learned so much from this chat so far. I'm just going to ask, what's next for you? And are you bringing gamification into play in everything you're doing now, or how's it looking?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reflecting on that journey, Pete, because the first experience was the wacky cowboy shoot 'em up. The next one was a sort of pared down KPMG Globerunner. The next two platforms are made for the firm after that. You can barely see the gamified features in there, but they're really strongly embedded in there. And so I don't think I'm ever going to walk away from using gamification as part of my design toolkit. I think that applied appropriately, it can be really, really powerful. Work I'm doing at the moment, I'm doing a bit of strategy work with different clients, but also for one client looking at the role of purposefulness in onboarding, but also around some other elements that are more business as usual as well. And so how can we with a greater increased focus on purposefulness, sustainability, the environment, all these sort of things, and people having a greater sense of purpose that's outside of work, you use that to help people be better in their own lives, but also for an organisation as well. So I've got some really interesting exam questions, Pete, that I've been asked to think about, and they're really cool. So yeah, that's what I'm spending my time on at the moment.
That's good. That sounds fascinating. And to be honest, it makes me want to come back for a repeat interview at some point, see how that went.
Oh, that'd be great, Pete.
All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up here and just say thanks a lot, Christian. This has been an amazing interview.
Thank you so much, Pete. Happy to contribute anytime.